So we got a bit of a complaint from a frequent watcher, commentator, and contributor to our little operation here. You might know him as Tanky. He's our one of our dropship captain. Always talks about delivering his loads and everything. And one thing he brought up was, hey, Chief, you keep making it sound super easy to install clan gear and such on Battlemechs. I have to agree with his assessment there. I really think this is a professional deformation on my part. I'm really used to working with clan gear. I have easy access to them because I have friends in Clan Sea Fox and Clan Snow Raven. But let's clear up some misconceptions here in regards to refitting machines. First thing, I keep talking about ferro-fibrous armor. Around here, we have a massive mill producing the compound by the kiloton. You add to this that Aspero Denton bought the rights to produce it from us, and they are also building the darn thing for close to 100 years, and they build it in massive amounts as well. The clan grade stuff is a little bit harder to make. You need to clean it up a whole lot more. But since we have a mill producing it and selling it to Clan Sea Fox, well, I don't have any real problem producing it, and it's really easier to produce a single type of compound than half a dozen of them. The great thing about Ferro-fibrous is just how it works. You fill up the bag or the hopper or whatever you want to call that thing. You program the piece you want to print in the little computer, and you press the button. In a couple of hours, the Ferro-fibrous weave just prints itself in a piece of laminated hardware, and you can just install it on a mech. It's a lot cheaper and a lot faster than casting full pieces, even when you're on the move. Imagine when you've got a full-scale refit and repair yards like I do. For us, doing anything in ferro-fibrous is a piece of cake compared to using standard compound, at least. Rearmoring an entire mech in ferro-fibrous is also pretty easy, as long as you've got the internal room to play with. Whatever you do, though, those printed pieces out of ferro-fibrous weave always do take up more room in the inside of a mech. There's no way you can really go about that. How about armoring things with another compound? Well, it's not always as easy as ferro-fibrous. Reflective weave is still also pretty easy. It's a paste that you print on demand, just like ferro-fibrous. I mean, it's based off the same thing. You need to have a license to produce the stuff because it's still very much a proprietary compound, but it's easy enough to do. You print it, you laminate it, and you install it. Stealth armor is crazy difficult to produce and to maintain. You need thermal baffles, you need all sorts of stuff like that, and it's a standard compound, so you actually need to cast it. It's not print on demand. So that's why I don't redo a whole lot of things in stealth armor. Reactive and ballistic reinforce, same kind of concept. It requires actual casting. It requires layered casting on those as well to absorb the blows or deflect the blows. Not the easiest thing to do. Hardened armor is a little bit like ferro-fibrous, but it is much heavier per layer that you thicken, and it takes a while to harden, basically. It's not as difficult to do. I know how to make it, and I know how to install it. In the end, rearmoring a mech is never going to be super complex because you're going to pull off those armor plates on the mech every time they come back from a mission where they got shot at anyways. So once you get used to taking them off, putting them back in, it might even be easier to replace them once ferro-fibrous is readily available. You do hear me complain a bit, or actually quite a bit, about Endo steel. Endo steel is hard to source. You need an orbital mill in order to build the stuff. Mobile orbital mills are a thing nowadays, but they're crazy expensive, and standard Endo steel orbital mills are not the easiest thing to get around. If you want to upgrade a mech to Endo steel, you must also strip the entire mech down, pull every single bone and connector off, and put in the new stuff. This is an hard thing to do even with a full refit yard, and you will notice that in a lot of the refits that I advertise, like here I'm having a Wolfhound 2 that someone brought in. Well, I stick ferro-fibrous on, but I'm not going to put an Endo steel chassis on, because if you're not bringing me a mech that already has an Endo steel chassis, I'm not going to install one, because that would be the price of making a brand new mech. It's not something you can easily do in the boonies or on your dropship. You need a full yard in order to do that. Endo composite is a little bit easier to do because you sometimes only have to replace some parts like the arms, the legs with a more endo steel compound, but you will often still require an orbital mill to produce that endo steel, depending on what is needed. Endo and internal work is always a lot harder to do. Engine work and gyro work is also terrifying. Replacing an engine requires you to open up the Battlemech and disconnecting everything. So all the myomer connectors, all the power couplings, everything needs to be replaced. Switching an engine like for like is not as terrible. So if you're changing a standard fusion for another standard fusion, especially if it's a common enough one, you should be able to do it with a lot of work in a refit yard, but it's doable. Setting something like a light engine or an Excel engine will require even more work. And once you start messing with the gyro on top of it, things get really confusing. Most engines that you buy come with the gyro assembly pre-assembled on them nowadays. So replacing a gyro because you're changing the engine completely can be a lot of work. Nothing that's easy to do without a full facility. Weapons are another thing altogether. There's a lot of different types of weapon, and often enough you can do switches in the same general area decently well. Swapping an inner sphere grade ER medium laser for a clan grade ER medium laser will usually require some finagling, some reprogramming of the targeting computer, and where it gets really painful is that you need to find out what the connectors are to make sure everything connects properly. You have to dig through the list of models in order to make sure you have the right one. You can usually swap Martels for Series 2Bs, Magnas for Series 2F. The Defiance one also follow the Series 2F connectors, but they're a little bit shorter, so you have to arrange the plating around them a little bit to make sure that they fit right. Trying to swap one for one will probably take you a few hours to a couple of days, depending on the type of weapon and equipment. We have handy charts for that now at the factory that our technicians can sit down and look at, but it's easier to say than to actually do, especially with some of the really odd mechs out there that have a lot of non-standard parts. Exchanging Gauss rifles, on the other hand, is pretty easy. The difference between an inner sphere Gauss rifle and a clan Gauss rifle is literally, well, how heavy is it? The internal, the feed mechanism, all that stuff is all based on the same technology from the Star League. Makes you really appreciate it. Autocannons, on the other hand, are entirely crazy. Replacing an 88 5-class autocannon with a 120mm 5-class autocannon is already a bit of a pain. Then if you try to put a clan grade 75 ultra class 5 autocannon to replace either that 88 or that 120, you have to change the feed mechanism, you have to change the loader, you have to make sure that the atmospheric pressure gauges are set up properly. It's really a nightmare to set up autocannons and to swap autocannons unless you have a good idea of what is going to be needed. You have to know your metric to imperial conversion, and you have to have a deep knowledge of the feed mechanism. We have specialists at the yard just for that, and we are going to charge you a premium if you want to swap autocannons on a mech because of that. Missile racks are usually not that terrible. There's a lot of different manufacturer, but the missile that goes inside is generally pretty standard. You have your differences between your clan grades and your inner sphere grade weapons, but you can usually work around it. Inner sphere grade weapons are much heavier because they don't use the same materials. Clan equipment is generally made with ferro-fibrous and endo steel, while the inner sphere ones are not, and the guiding computer in it is a little bit smaller on the clan side than the inner sphere side. This is the kind of stuff that you can learn on the job, and you can probably do it while you're in a dropship. Replacing a missile rack for a missile rack of the same kind of weight and size shouldn't be too terribly difficult until you get to the really weird stuff, like advanced tactical missile launchers. That one has a completely different feed mechanism, a different targeting system. You will need a computer engineer to make it work, so it's not always as easy. Remember, I'm a professional. I've got years of experience. I've got a full refit yard with a full crew of people and massive internal facilities, imports from friendly nations, and no war really looming over my head most of the time. If you want to be able to do stuff while in transit in your jump ship or your drop ship, it's always possible, but don't ask for some of the refits that I do to be done while you're on the go. It's probably not going to work. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.